Shepherd Sunday is with us once again, a Sunday in the church year that we have every year on this Sunday after Easter. Did you know the origin of Good Shepherd Sunday is that the Pope, I think it was Philip VI, who was the Pope in the Catholic Church in 1964, was dismayed because men weren't going to be priests and women weren't going into the convent, and how would the good news be shared if the numbers of these two vocations continue to dwindle? And so this Sunday became Good Shepherd Sunday and also Vocation Sunday, in which the church would pray for the leaders to go into this vocation that they might share God's good news with the world. So that worked well. 1964. You might think in 1964 people had other things on their mind, and you might think, what a better time to need the good news, right? Today we're going to look at what it means to be sheep and what it means to have a shepherd. And I couldn't help but think on the way here, as we try to figure out how to resuscitate might be too strong, but to keep alive the body of the church in a world which is solidly rejecting religion. How do you do that? But I was imagining newcomers showing up today, Good Shepherd Sunday, when we talk a whole lot about sheep and us being sheep. And I thought, they might walk out the door before we ever got to Holy Communion, right? It's an interesting thing we do in the life of the church. The 23rd Psalm is our psalm for the day, possibly the most beloved piece of scripture in the world, which became popular, which became something the whole world holds on to by funerals, not the other way around. If you wonder why people always say, I want the 23rd Psalm, oh, that started way back, and that's what made that psalm popular. It's so beloved, so popular that people write parodies of it, lots of them. Since we're almost to graduation, I thought I might start today by giving you a parody, kind of a lighthearted approach. Remember what it was like, or maybe you still are a student. Remember what it felt like to graduate? Remember what it felt like when you turned in your last test? A student's Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not flunk. He keepeth me from lying down when I should be studying. He leadeth me beside the water cooler for a study break. He restoreth my faith in study guides. He leads me to better study habits for my grades' sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of borderline grades, I will not have a nervous breakdown, for thou art with me. My prayers and my friends, they comfort me. Thou givest me answers in moments of blankness. Thou anointest my head with understanding. My test paper runneth over with questions I recognize. Surely, passing grades and flying colors shall follow me all the days of my examinations, and I shall not have to dwell in this university or school forever.
All right.
Right? It's a good formula, Psalm 23. You can drop in all kinds of good things, can't you? And it is beloved. It is beloved. The poetry of it warms our hearts. But I want to start today by talking a little bit about the gospel reading from John. The Hebrew background to Jesus' words. Ezekiel 34, which we did not read, tells us the opposite of what a good shepherd is. Provides warnings against the current shepherds of Israel, false shepherds. We might say wolves in sheep's clothing. We might recognize that still happening today. Ezekiel 34 says that the shepherds of Israel at the time drank the milk, wore the wool, slaughtered the fat animals, They did not tend the flock, strengthen the weak, heal the sick, bind up the injured, bring back the strays, or seek out the lost. They were ruled with injustice, and ultimately they scattered the flock, scattered them, divided them, the opposite of what the Good Shepherd or a Good Shepherd should be doing. In Isaiah 40, which we read in Advent, God is compared to the giver of comfort as a shepherd. We read, like a shepherd, God will tend the flock. He will gather lambs in his arms and lift them into his lap. He will gently guide the nursing ewes. Good shepherd imagery is all through the Bible. And whether we want to cop to being sheep or not, it is intended for us, and it does comfort in some odd ways. The reading from John that I read as the gospel, it's interesting to note that this reading happens in John immediately after Jesus heals a man born blind, who is then expelled by teachers who thought he was below them. Turns out the one who was born blind is the one who truly sees. When Jesus talks to the Pharisee, he tells them, I have come into the world to exercise judgment so that those who don't see can see, and those who see will become blind. And the Pharisees say, surely we aren't blind, are we? A rhetorical question if there ever was one. Jesus then goes into this long metaphor about sheep and shepherds, of which this is a part. An interesting segue from the question, we aren't blind, are we? It's almost like Jesus said, or didn't say, but intoned, actually, you are blind. You need me. You need me. This has become a world in which a lot of times the church, the people in the church in various places, they stack up their good deeds as if God needs us. And they forget that actually we need God first and foremost, right? When we participate in the work of helping the kingdom to break in on earth, we are doing God's will. But in the end, it isn't about God needing us. It's about us needing God. So now that we've discovered, possibly at moments, maybe occasionally, we didn't mean to, we are blind, that we're also sheep. Now, I have always heard Good Shepherd Sunday, I've always heard sermons about how dumb sheep are. But actually, and this is really good news if we are supposed to identify with sheep, they're not stupid and mindless. Did you know that sheep can remember the face of 50 individual people or animals for up to 2 years? Oh, that we might do that as we age, right? Sheep must be led, often by goats. Goats sometimes intentionally led sheep to animals who would kill them. Those are called Judas goats, for real. Sheep are extremely communal animals. They establish firm friendships and they look out for one another in times of need. Rams were found to form long-term relationships, and they intervened on behalf of weaker colleagues and supported each other in fights, according to a 1993 study. And their acts of loyalty and friendship building were driven by emotions, according to a report published in Animal Welfare. Interesting. Sheep are capable of experiencing a whole range of feelings, from fear to anger, despair, boredom, happiness. They're sounding more and more like dogs, right? They are fertile This one's really interesting. They are fertile and demonstrate sexual preference with 8% exhibiting a lifelong same-gender sexual preference. We are sheep. Understanding sheep behavior, we know that they're social animals, so they try and prevent seclusion. When one wanders off or secludes themselves, 2 other sheep will go and convince that one to come back. They're by nature followers. You don't let them follow, you drive them from behind. Otherwise, they would stay and continue to eat the same grass even after the grass is already eaten. That's why they have to be driven. They're docile. This is an interesting one. Sheep have good memories. I don't know how they got the sheep to talk about their memories in this study, but apparently they have good memories, and the memories need to be positive. Maybe that's because they have nightmares. They like routine. They're predictable. They react negatively to loud noises and yelling. They tend to move in the opposite direction of the handler unless the handler is skilled. They move best when they're not afraid. They move best when they are not afraid. They move toward other sheep. They have no depth perception, so shadows and dark surfaces and water are an issue, which has me looking at Psalm 23 a little bit differently. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Turns out that part of the reason that the shepherd in Psalm 23, where there's this reference to the shadows, it's both practical and metaphorical. When shepherds would take care of sheep, they would have to drive them around a mountain, start on the plain, around the mountain this way, to continue to get to fresh grass that they needed. They would eat all the grass, they'd have to move on, and they did this up to the top of the mountain in one given season. And in order to do that, they had to go through valleys as well as peaks in order to do that. And the valleys were always shady, shadowed. Interesting. And the last note about sheep is they can be very destructive. There are 1.2 billion sheep in the world. Unchecked, they can consume to the point of decimating other species. In today's reading from John, Jesus says, I have other sheep, not of this flock. Probably a reference to the Gentiles at that time. Also probably works in concert with, for God so loved the world, not just this one flock, right? But it does kind of bring up the thought, who are the other flocks? And why are we as a people, I mean, let's be honest, somewhat reluctant, resistant to join forces with other flocks? We do like our comfort, don't we? But in a world in which the church is dwindling and individual conversations are finding their pews more and more empty, it does make me wonder if this is a nudge, a holy nudge, that Jesus can't continue to run around to all these churches. You all are going to have to get in the same place one way or another. You are one. Jesus' ongoing prayer, unity for all of us. And that brings me to the 23rd Psalm. Because I could tell you all these fun facts about sheep. We could agree that there's some pretty compelling reason to understand why we are considered sheep. We can look at the relationship between the good shepherd and the sheep. We can talk about how at the top of the mountain where the sheep were led was often a mesa. There is a famous one in Africa that is known as Table Mountain, where it's flat. And part of the reason in the Psalm 23 it says, you prepare a banquet in front of my enemies, is because the wolves, the animals that would descend upon and slaughter the sheep, would be around the perimeter. But if the shepherd is there and it's flat while the sheep are eating in that place, the shepherd can see where all of the enemies are and better protect. We could talk about all of these interesting specifics, and yet, why? Why is this such a beloved Psalm 23? Why is this a beloved gospel? What moves our heart with the idea that Jesus is the good shepherd in a world where very few of us have ever met a shepherd, right? Rabbi Kushner, famous for the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People. He died this week last year, and we lost a beloved man of God, who knew all too well the depth of pain, having a child with a terrible disease, who died early. And he spent his entire life grappling with that pain and living in a world which to him was frightening and heartbreaking. But in his book, on the 23rd Psalm, The Lord is my shepherd, healing wisdom of the 23rd Psalm, he writes this, and this is where I want to leave us today. The words, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, are the Bible's clearest and most succinct response to the question of why bad things happen to good people. God does not explain. God comforts. There's a passage in the book of Exodus, he writes, in which the Israelites, thirsty after marching through the Sinai wilderness, come to a pool of brackish water not fit to drink. God shows Moses a tree that when thrown into the water sweetens it and makes it drinkable. A commentator imagines an exchange in which Moses asks God, what was the point of your creating something utterly useless, like undrinkable water? What exactly did you have in mind when you created cockroaches, gypsy moths, scorpions? God answers Moses, this is not a time for theology, for speculating on why certain things exist, for asking God why. This is a time for action, for doing something to sweeten the bitterness and ease the people's thirst, rather than debate the theological issue of why they are thirsty. You don't have to understand the world and everything in it to make it a better place. So too, the psalmist is saying to us, when bad things happen to you, the challenge is not to explain them, to justify them, or even to accept them. The challenge is to survive them and go on living. And the key to surviving misfortune is the realization that when bad things happen, God is on our side. The illness, the accident are not God's will. When we choose to affirm life in the face of loss, to affirm goodness in the face of evil, we are on God's side. He is with us. And we are with God, and the future does not frighten